that's just, for me, a really quick, easy option to pinpoint what it is about the boundary that's not working for you, is what is your assumption. And what I would like to open up now for me is the 3 different components of boundary setting, which are absolutely essential. And very quickly, we will see which area you're strong in and which area is a growing skill for you. And that will highlight why some of the things that's happening for you are just not working. So, there are 3 components, as they have been highlighted already, and I'm going to mention that boundary setting is a bit like, this element of like D-Day. It's like, here it happens. This is where the boundary sits, and it's going to consist of 3 different criteria. Firstly is detail. Okay, so describing in detail. Now, for most people, they're not even aware of what their boundary is, which is very challenging, because boundaries are often things which we have an emotion, something comes up, and then we reflect on that and figure out why what's going on there, why am I feeling so frustrated? So I'm going to take the example of, let's say, of a boy, James. Let's say he's 5 years old. I've asked James to keep his room tidy. Okay? And by tidy, let's just unpack what that means. Now, tidy for an 18-year-old is going to be quite different for tidy for a 5-year-old, right? When we often say to James, you need to keep your room tidy, I'm like wondering, what does James understand by tidy? Does he think that it means he must fold all of his clothes neatly, and the folds need to all be as if they've been freshly ironed? Does tidy mean that all his blocks need to be packed neatly in size range in the shelf? Does it mean that there is nothing on the floor? Puzzles? Does it mean that nothing, even like little bits of paper, can't be on the floor? Does it mean that he should have vacuumed his carpet? So tidy is going to vary. And when you just say to whoever it is, your child, this is what I'm needing from you, how clear are you in exactly what that means? Because somewhere in your mind, you actually do know it, but you're not necessarily conscious of it or haven't expressed it. So if you're not clear about that, then if they then tidy their rooms, but their definition of tidy is different to yours, you're going to have conflict, because you're going to think that they're not keeping their room tidy. And James is going to turn around and say, but it is tidy. Look, I took all my clothes off the floor and they're in the cupboard. You open the cupboard and there all the clothes are, right? Pushed in. And you're like, yeah, but that's not tidy. Tidy means folded. And now you realize that there's an inconsistency in your definitions. So first and foremost, you need to get clear in detail what your boundary is. And then, obviously, you need to share that. So the first part is detail. The next part is delivery. Delivery is the way in which you are now sharing what that boundary is. If we're going back to our initial conversation, we're opening up this understanding that the boundary is yours. It is a need you have. Now, if you are going to deliver this boundary, okay, by saying that your child must fulfill in it, and they must obey it, or they must do what you're asking them to do, they're going to experience that their needs are also not being met. Okay, which is where the resistance is. Because part of our struggle with boundary setting is, again, this power dynamic. We're asking our children to do stuff, and they're not necessarily doing it, so we get frustrated. The degree of success of how you share what the boundary is going to depend on whether your child also feels that you have their best interest at heart. Not necessarily that you can meet their need, because that might not be appropriate or possible, except that they're also knowing that you're not just out there to get them. So if you're coming and saying, James, this room had better be cleaned or else, or you're coming from a space of, James, we tidy our rooms, or our rooms are kept tidy, and I'd like to see how we can find a way to keep it tidy so that it works for you and me. That's a very different delivery of how I'm getting that boundary in place. So if you're thinking about it, the delivery is the way in which we want to get the buy-in of our children into agreeing to our boundary, right? Because it's our boundary, we want to put it in place, and we need to get them to conform to it. So the way in which we deliver this, these are your skill sets, your understanding, your techniques, is what's going to really be essential to ensure that they also feel, yes, the energy they're bringing to keeping this boundary is really useful. The third one is the area which I think, in my experience so far, most people fall short on, is the diligence of a boundary. And what I'm meaning by there is diligence. Some of the definitions are thoroughness, your consistency, the attention to detail. So what happens is I've now gone and said to James, let's say I've been fantastic here. I've been really strong. I'm very clear on what detail looks like. And what I've actually done is I've gone and marked out exactly where the blocks go and where the clothes go, and we're clear on that. I've delivered it successfully. In other words, I've really shared it with him in such a way that he's like, yeah, we can do that, no problem. And what happens is I say, excellent, great. He said no problem. I leave it for the first day, second day, fourth day. The fifth day, I'm assuming, right, that he's now doing this. I walk in and there's absolute shambles in his room. And I'm like, but I thought you agreed. He says, oh, I just forgot. Or whatever the story is he tells me. But there's no system that I've put in place to ensure that this boundary is going to be kept up or be consistent. I had assumed that he would just do it because we agreed on it. So there's not a system like for example, okay, great. So we've got an agreement that the clothes are going to be folded, blocks are going to be there. Let's have a check. And tomorrow when I come home, let me come in and let's have a look and see. And let's see if that system works for you. Okay. So now we know tomorrow I'm going to come in. There's part of my diligence. I'm going to check to see if what we've discussed is appropriate, is going to work, and is going to be successful. That's the diligence part. It could be that after that night, it's like, okay, excellent, great, well done. It looks like that what you did today is also working for you. So maybe what we can do is maybe in 4 days' time, we can check in again and see if it's still working for you or if we need to change anything. 4 days' time, great, we put it in place and I can come in and check. And maybe at that time I realize, James says to me at 5 years old, he might say, yeah, but Dad, this is really difficult because I can't reach those shelves at the top and it actually takes me so long to put my clothes there. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we could find another way to keep your clothes at a height that's accessible to you. Right? So I'm opening up a process because what diligence is, and this is where it comes back down to our original conversation about this is your boundary, is consider that because it's your boundary, you're needing to take full responsibility for the support of your child putting that boundary in place. You need to take responsibility to support your child in keeping that boundary. So instead of complaining that they're not putting the boundary in place, consider that your energy shifts from opposed to just complaining to something which is, how can I support you to keep this boundary in place?
Please say that one more time.
Sure.
I need to be responsible
yes.
for my child putting the boundary in. No, I can't do it.
Okay.
Can you say that, please?
So I'm going to be responsible because I'm aware that this is my boundary, that I'm wanting you to fulfill on, that I'm therefore going to support you in keeping this boundary, as opposed to complaining that you don't keep the boundary.
Right. Okay.
It's my boundary. And whatever I need in this world, I'm going to be responsible for because I need you to do something that I need.
Like,
so,
for example, gentle reminders all the time.
Yes, exactly. That's the diligence part, right? Because usually what we do is once we've put it in place, we start complaining that they're not doing what we've asked them to do.
Okay, I get it.
When we realize that it's actually our need, then we can start looking at, okay, so I'm not getting the result that I want. My child keeps forgetting. So what can I do that will support them to remember? It's a whole different energy in how you're approaching it. Yes, I also get that there's a strong drive and belief that we're actually wanting our children to also be independent of us and also to take responsibility for what they've said. If our awareness is how to support them in that, even the question I could come and ask in this process, I could come and say, yeah, I've noticed that for the last 3 or 4 days, it looks like it's been really difficult to remember all the different things that we've chatted about. So what would support you to remember these things so that it's all in place? So I'm not doing all the hard work. I'm just supporting my child in thinking about what systems he could put in place so that works. And what I mean by systems, like I shared before, that maybe I'd said after the first day we would check in, maybe after the 4th day we'd check in, what would happen if I forget? So we check in the first day, but I said 4 days and then I forget. Because I don't have a system to support me in remembering. So what I use is, for example, I use my calendar or my phone. If I say to someone, I'm going to do this, I put it in my phone. Because if I forget, then this boundary can't be very important to me if I'm forgetting. So how can I expect my child to remember if I forget? And it's my boundary. But that's what we do. We start complaining that they've forgotten. Meanwhile, we've also forgotten what's important to us because we've said it's important, and actually it doesn't show up that way. Which is why I keep saying that the degree to which you take the boundary seriously is going to be the degree to which they will need to take the boundary seriously. If I do check-ins every day, my child at some point will really get that this is a non-negotiable and it needs to happen. If I can do that, but in a way that keeps their dignity intact, then they're not going to feel threatened by it, but they're actually going to feel that I'm helping them to put my boundary in place. And they're going to be thankful for that, which is a real empowering space to be in. So All of these are absolutely essential. Otherwise, you're not going to get the kind of result that you're wanting. For some children, you might find that these all need to be far more extensive and detailed. For others, you might only have to say a few words because your definition and their definition are pretty similar, or it's actually quite clear. You might find that actually this isn't so much of an issue for you. You can just say it in a few words, and you don't need to say too much because they follow it up. What I'm raising is that wherever you're currently not experiencing the result that you're wanting, have a look to see in which one of these it is.